Hi, and welcome to Quarantine Cocktails with Chad and Nicole.
Today we're talking about the Corpse Reviver number 2, another in the family of Corpse Reviver drinks that were originally intended to be hangover cures. Like the Corpse Reviver number 1 that we talked about last week, this one owes its popularity to Harry Craddock, who was an English bartender at the American bar in London's Savoy Hotel in the 1920s to 30s-ish. He also wrote the book, the Savoy Cocktail Book, around 1930, which was a pretty large one at the time. It compiled a total of 750 cocktails, and it is still in print today.
Yeah. And the Corpse Reviver 2 is interesting in that it doesn't share any ingredients with the Corpse Reviver number 1 that we did in our last episode. And his recipe for the number 2 consisted of equal parts London dry gin,
It's upside down.
equal parts London dry gin, Cointreau, Quinoa Lillet, and lemon juice, and a dash of absinthe. And you'll note that we have Lillet Blanc, because that's what Quinoa Lillet evolved into, although some people use Cochi Americano. He noted, Craddock noted in his book that while this is a corpse reviver, 4 of these taken in swift succession will unrevive the corpse again. So be careful how many you have.
So the Corpse Reviver number 2 also appears in Patrick Gavin Duffy's official Mixer's Manual from 1934, but by the 1956 edition, Cointreau had been replaced by Punch. Is that the way you pronounce it? Punch, which is a special liqueur, spiced orange citrus flavored liqueur from Sweden. This punch-based cocktail variation today is sometimes called the Corpse Reviver 2A, in part because Duffy had already listed a Corpse Reviver number 3 in his book that included lemon juice, Pernod, and champagne.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And another Corpse Reviver drink cropped up in the 1950s. This one was invented by some of the same folks, some of the folks at the same Savoy Hotel American bar, where they combined cognac, Fernet Branca, and creme de menthe. This one became known as either Corpse Reviver number 3 or number 4, depending on how you count.
So the Corpse Reviver number 2 saw revitalization in the 2000s, where it became a favorite amongst bartenders who tweaked it in various ways. One cheeky variation of the drink that emerged in 2008 was the Corpse Reviver number Blue, which substitutes blue curacao for the Cointreau as a way to get a rise out of the bartenders, since blue curacao is kind of can be an ingredient that is laughed upon.
It's looked down upon in many ways.
In some circles.
So that's the history of the Corpse Reviver and some of its variations and other family members. But now let's talk a little bit about the ingredients of the drink.
Sure. So, first ingredient, very important, London dry gin. We've talked about it quite a lot. We've discussed it during our Martinez episode, so we won't go too much into that today. But, there's a lot of information out there in case you don't know that much about it.
Check out our Martinez episode. It's some pretty fun facts
it's interesting,
about gin there.
Yeah.
Cointreau, we've also talked about before, a French reinterpretation of Curacao, which dates back to 1875. And in fact, it was originally called Curacao Blanco Triple Sec. Interestingly, Cointreau today distanced itself from the term triple sec, since there have been a number of lower quality triple secs that have come into the market, and they're sort of the earliest original triple sec.
So for the demoed version we're doing today, we're actually swapping out the Cointreau for Yellow Chartreuse, interestingly enough, which is a different French liqueur. We discussed Chartreuse quite a bit when we talked about the daiquiri. Yeah, that is kind of weird, but that's what we did. As a reminder, the Carthusian monks produced Chartreuse about 110 proof in the green Chartreuse, dating back to 1764 and introduced the sweeter 80 proof Yellow Chartreuse in 1838. So it's a pretty old.
Well, the recipe dates back even into the 1600s as some sort of miracle medicinal recipe. So we used green chartreuse in our daiquiri and also in the last word, but today we're using yellow chartreuse. And this variation was became popular in the 2000s in London. And in fact became more popular at that time in that area than Craddock's original recipe.
So the next thing we want to talk about, which is kind of interesting, is Quina Lillet, which is an aromatized wine, 85% semillon, 15% liqueur, mostly citrus. It also contains some quinine liqueur made from the
Cinchona
bark, which results in some bitterness to the flavoring profile. This makes Lillet one of the in a class of the bittered aromatized wines known as quinquina.
And Quina Lillet was originally formulated in 1887. At the time, tonic wines containing quinine or cinchona bark were very popular in France, owing to concerns that had arisen from the microbiological work of Louis Pasteur. Cinchona bark and quinine that came from it was had already been discovered as something of a fever reducer and cure for, or at least attempted a cure for malaria. And so Quina Lillet came out into this group of other aromatized wines, but it was the only actually white wine at the time, which set it apart a little bit. And it gained in popularity pretty quickly, and it became fashionable amongst New York high society in the early 1900s after it was introduced onto the and served on the transatlantic liners, which then led to it being used by American bartenders who affected Harry Craddock because he actually trained in the U.S. before returning and working at the American. Exactly.
So Quina Lillet today is most famous for its presence in James Bond's martini recipe, as some of you may know. However, the Quina was dropped from the name in the 1970s, and in 1980, Lillet, now known as Lillet Blanc, was reformulated with less quinine, resulting in a sweeter flavor. Another well-known fictional character apparently liked this updated version of Lillet is Thomas Harris's Hannibal Lecter, who drank it on the rocks with a slice of orange.
There you go. And apparently, probably while he was having his liver and Chianti, fava beans. So this reformulation is actually why some cocktail traditionalists recommend using a different quinquina called Cocchi Americano when they make classic drinks that call for Quina Lillet as the Cocchi Americano may actually hark back to the Quina Lillet flavor a bit more than the modern Lillet Blanc.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So lastly, we come to absinthe, which we discussed extensively in our Sazerac episode. Here, we'll note that some modern interpretations chose to use an absinthe rinse for the glass, for the Corpse Reviver number 2, rather than directly incorporating it into the drink itself, as Craddock's recipe does. You can do either one, but today we're going to follow Craddock's lead on this front, especially because we're using the sweeter Mephisto absinthe rather than the more astringent absinthe that we used earlier in our Sazerac episode.
Yep. So we couldn't find a clever name out there already for the Yellow Chartreuse variation on the Corpse Reviver number 2. And so we're calling our take today the Miracle Max, named after one of our favorite fictional corpse revivers. So here is our Miracle Max recipe.
For those of you who don't know who Miracle Max is, he's Billy Crystal's character in The Princess Bride.
Exactly.
One of the best movies of all time.
Of course. So today we'll be using our old friend, the Empress 1908 Indigo Gin that we used in our gin sour episode. One of the fun things about this gin is the presence of the butterfly pea flower essence within it, which gives it this dark indigo color, but also makes it pH reactive. And so it'll actually lend a little nice color to this drink, which often ends up very, very pale. But this will add a little bit of color as we mix it with the citrus of the lemon.
A little hint of life.
Exactly, just mostly dead. So we've got our Lillet Blanc. We'll be using the Lillet. It goes well with the Chartreuse. A little bit better actually than the Cochi Americano. I tried both out, but in this recipe I like the way that it came out with the Lillet Blanc. Here is the Yellow Chartreuse. Looks a lot like the green Chartreuse, but just a little bit paler. And sweeter in its flavor profile. And then lastly, we're going to use this Mephisto absinthe. Love the fact that you can pick up this and a couple other absinthes in sort of these small bottles, because you don't really need to use a whole lot. Not maybe the greatest absinthe to have just on its own, but it's pretty good mixed in this drink and gives it just that lovely anise flavor comes through, just along with some of the other herbal notes coming from the Chartreuse, and I think it comes out very well. All right, so let's get to preparing the drink. So Nicole is going to work on fresh squeeze. So the other ingredient, of course, we didn't talk about is a fresh squeezed lemon. We always squeeze our lemon fresh. We never let it sit for very long because of the oxidization that happens if you leave it in place. So while she squeezes the lemon, I forgot to pre-open this bottle. It's a brand new bottle of the Empress.
Well, we need saline today.
We will need the saline. Thank you very much. So one of the other things that we use whenever we whenever we're using citrus, is we like to add a few drops of saline. It helps to cut back on the bitterness and let the sweet and tart flavors come through more strongly. It actually blocks receptors in the tongue for bitterness. And so that is an important element, and we add a couple drops of the saline into every drink, for every drink.
Antoine Jones says fancy.
Yeah. We gotta share these little tricks that we've learned from certainly more experienced bartenders. That one I think came from Liquid Intelligence, which is a really fascinating book about a lot of the science behind cocktails. Just really pretty cool. All right, finally got my bottle open. I'm gonna use my jigger. And since these are 3/4 ounces, I need a 1.5 ounce jigger to do 2 drinks at once. So I will get my nice indigo colored Empress, but it will change color as it reacts to the pH of the other ingredients. And we'll actually end up...
You can see that it's purple in color. Kind of a bluish purple.
And the other thing that you'll note is that this is the 4 equal parts formula that we've got going here is actually very reminiscent of the last word cocktail. With the gin as the base spirit, you've got a citrus element, you've got a sweet liqueur, and then you've got an herbaceous liqueur of sorts.
Very similar.
Yep. Although the Lillet wouldn't technically be considered a liqueur, but it does have some liqueur elements to it.
And you want to use that for the lemon juice as well?
We'll just also add the lemon juice.
Is it enough?
Yep.
Great.
Perfect. All right. We'll add in 4 drops of our
saline.
Saline. our little secret ingredient. And then I will put in 2 times 2 dashes of the absinthe, and I'm just putting it directly into the drink. Now, this is a citrus-based drink, and that means that we're going to shake it, and that serves the purpose of aerating the drink along with cooling it and diluting it, and that aeration also cuts back on some of the bitterness.
I'll let you do it.
Okay.
I don't know how much you need.
Oh yeah, we just fill it, we usually get it so that it's about 3/4 full. And again, we're using the freezer ice, so it's pretty cold and dry, much drier than they use in the bars. And so we will shake that for quite a long time, probably 35 seconds. So we have a question about the Empress. Does it expire? No, it's just a very small amount of that tea flower essence in there. So it's has the same shelf life as any other gin, which is pretty long. All right.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's out of British Columbia, Canada, actually.
Yep.
So if you find their Instagram, you can see all the pretty colors of their cocktails that they've made using different acidic or basic ingredients, and it changes the color. It's pretty cool.
Right.
And the taste of it is a pretty standard gin taste, kind of like a
Like a Bombay.
So it's
I
nice
think
and
similar
mixing
profile as just kind of a straight up London dry gin. All right, so here we go, and you'll see that the color has changed to kind of a light pale violet, almost verging on pink. So still a little blue blush in there. All right. And I should have really double strained that. I was not thinking. I should have put it through my double strainer. So this will have a little bit more dilution than I had intended, but it'll still be pretty good.
I like it a little frosty.
Yeah, sometimes that frosty ice chip sensation is pleasing.
I enjoy that.
But I think, canonically you would double strain, and that was my error in this one take live broadcast.
And we're garnishing it with just a simple strip of lemon peel, expressing the oils.
Yep,
You
express the
wanna put it on
oil. You can
edge or
cut it to put it on the edge if you want,
up to you.
however you would like to, or you can discard it after expressing the essence.
Let's put it on the edge.
Craddock's original recipe did not contain a garnish, but
think it's pretty though.
Sometimes it's nice to get that little extra bit of brightness from the citrus oils. All right, well, how is this? Cheers to everyone out there. Enjoy your cocktail and have fun storming the castle.